Hello and welcome to the Mr. Strategy and Mrs. Wellbeing show. Sharing other, not what you might usually expect, examples from the not-profit sector.
Hello, awesome humans, and welcome to episode 5 of Mr. Strategy and Mrs. Wellbeing. First off, as always, a massive thank you for all the feedback that we continually receive. It really does help and it really does drive us forwards. And I think our last episode with Director of Happiness, Janet Layton, really cheered up a whole heap of people. So thank you for the positivity there. As always, also a big shout out to Fundraising Everywhere. Not only do they power this, but they produce it as well. So massive thank you to them. But if it is the first time that you've tuned in to listen or watch, you're probably wondering what the heck we're trying to do. So in its simplest form, Claire Warner and I had a bit of a light bulb moment last year. And basically, I work in the field of strategy and Claire works in the field of well-being. But our approach, even though they're two different things, our approach to those things are really similar and not what you would conventionally think of as strategy or well-being. What we actually focus on is people and culture. So we had this idea of there are lots of positive and really human-focused stuff happening in the sector at the moment that are not what you would conventionally think of. So we decided to create this podcast to create some positivity and to shine a light on some of the amazing things that are happening in our sector. So I'm going to stop now and hand over to Claire to introduce our absolutely awesome guest.
Thank you, Wayne. So today is an amazing guest, but a bit of a guest with a difference, because this guest was originally highlighted to us because somebody told her she wasn't what you would not conventionally expect of. And the wonderful, amazing human being that is Sarah Atkinson has graced us with her presence today. Thank you, Sarah. And you'll have to correct me if I'm wrong. I think it was 2020, but it might have been 2019. When somebody commented on the photograph, which is the one that we're using today to publicise the show, that said that this wasn't what a CEO should look like, that Sarah was showing too much flesh to look like a CEO, which is just absolutely, the fact that there is a thing that a CEO looks like was abhorrent to many of us. The fact that there was somebody out there being labelled as not what you would conventionally expect from was almost a light bulb moment to Wayne and I going, look, there's a little club of us. So without further ado, Sarah Atkinson is currently the CEO of the Social Mobility Foundation, a charity working to ensure young people from disadvantaged backgrounds achieve their full potential. Before joining the Social Mobility Foundation, Sarah was at the Charity Commission for 13 years in various roles, ending up as Director of Strategy, Policy and Communications. She's a proud trustee of Endometriosis UK and was a previous trustee of Womankind Worldwide and the Professional Association of Childcare and Early Years. She's also a volunteer mentor for Leaders Plus. Sarah Atkinson, hello, thank you very much for joining us.
Hello, it's lovely to be here and see you. What better could we be doing? I sound terribly conventional when you read my bio out, honestly. I sound as conventional as all get out, but here I am.
And so we obviously reached out to talk to you around that whole, the awful incident around the not what a CEO looks like. And we also talked about that very interesting juncture, I guess, between almost gamekeeper turned poacher, going from regulator to charity CEO. So would you like to share with us a little bit about both instances, but the transition as well, please?
Yeah, very glad to. It was an extraordinary moment. It was an extraordinary moment when I got the letter in the first place, and then it turned into a kind of series of extraordinary moments. So I got, this was a letter that was sent to us at the SMF. Yeah, I was the chief exec. I'd been in post before 6 months, something like that. And we got a letter, and actually the first emotion was I felt a bit of a letdown, because we'd got some post to the charity's office. Obviously the office was closed because we were in lockdown, and I got the post through to me, and it was the letter with a handwritten envelope. And last time we had a letter with a handwritten envelope, it was money. So I opened it thinking, oh, it might be a check. And then I read this letter, which was basically saying, look, I really support the SMF and what you do, but I've seen your photo. You need to take that down. It's not appropriate. It's much too much flesh on display. It's not a CEO look, and people won't support the organisation. So I went from, oh, has someone given us money, to, oh my God, I'm doing a terrible job as the chief exec, destroying my charity's reputation. Oh dear. Then kind of read it again, and then started to get a bit cross, and was a bit like, this isn't on, actually. This is couched as a supportive letter, but it's really not a supportive letter. It's really not a nice letter at all. And I shared it with my husband, who said, firstly, obviously said, what picture is she talking about? Which was also what my mother said, but then said, ignore it, put it in the bin, don't be ridiculous. But I actually ended up having a conversation with a couple of people about it in the context of what we do, what my organisation does, which is we work with young people who, because of their backgrounds, because they come from low socioeconomic backgrounds, they're working class kids, who don't have families who are doing professional jobs. They're not at schools often that are able to support really academically talented young people. They don't have networks, and so there are lots of barriers around them being able to achieve the things that they have the potential to achieve. They're very bright and ambitious, but there's just lots of barriers in their way. And I was talking about the irony of someone saying to me, well, you don't look like a CEO, so therefore you're not a CEO. In exactly the same way that people will say to the young people we work with, you don't look like you should be a doctor, a lawyer, running an investment bank. You don't sound like. And we also talked about the fact that actually the woman, it was a woman, which is surprising to some people, but it was a woman who'd written me this letter. And I didn't, when I put it in the public domain, I didn't share her details. I won't share her details. I don't think that's fair. But she talked to me about she said something about her career, the career that she'd had, from which she was now retired. And I actually started to feel a bit sorry for her, because it became clear that actually she thought that she was giving me good advice, supportive advice, because this kind of nonsense is the sort of advice she'd had in her career. Change the way you look, change the way you are. You're going to have to work to fit in. You're going to have to prove yourself, because you need to look like our expectations. Our expectations aren't going to change. So all of this, and I'm talking about all of this and reflecting on all of this, and talking particularly to someone I expect you both know, Zoe Amar, who said to me, you should do something about this, Sarah. You should share it, because there's some message in this and some learning. And I shared it, and people were lovely. And it encouraged me to share a photo, a much more candid photo. It was actually a very raw photo of me about, 4 hours after my son was born. So I looked like, absolute, I hadn't washed my hair for weeks, probably. I'm in a particularly tatty dressing gown, and look a right old state. To share that and say, you can look like a CEO if you look like this. And I tagged a couple of people and said, come on, you share a photo of you not looking like a CEO. And it went everywhere. I've never been viral before, and it was absolutely the loveliest thing. It was a kind of cold, damp, I think by then it was about October afternoon, and clearly a lot of people were bored and looking for something that was positive and that was cheerful. And it went absolutely everywhere. And I was getting tweeted from New Zealand and Canada and people all around the country. People were sharing, inspiring pictures of them and dreadful pictures of them, and pictures of them in drag, and pictures of them kind of doing terribly heroic things, running up mountains to raise funds for their charity, and pictures of them looking sort of slightly weepy with several toddlers clinging to them. And people also were sharing stories about the advice that they'd had. You are going to have to drop your Geordie accent if you want to be taken seriously. You are going to find it difficult to be a CEO from a wheelchair. Your first message to your staff sounds a bit gay. these are the sorts of things that we are still saying to each other in 2020. You know, not you're not inspiring, or you don't know your stuff, or people don't look up to you, but you don't look right, you don't sound like right, particularly women, working class people, people of colour, people with visible disabilities, all of whom we know are underrepresented in leadership levels in our sector as they are everywhere else. And so it was this kind of beautiful, joyful outpouring of all these people who didn't know each other all around the country, all sort of going, of course you are not too fat, too gay, too beardy, too weird to be a CEO. And other people looking at it kind of going, I'd quite like to be CEO one day, and it's quite nice to think I'm not too gay, having two legs is necessary, all of this stuff. It also, of course, did bring it home that there aren't enough of those visible role models. There aren't enough people of colour in leadership positions. There are not enough people who are confidently and proudly working class. There are definitely not enough people with visible disabilities. So it was also a reminder that celebrating those positive role models is something we have to do all the time, because it's really important, and reaching out to people who want to aspire to be a CEO to say there's no such thing as a conventional look or a conventional background. There's just the talent and the hard work and the determination, and we can help each other. All of that was something that it was just brilliant to share. It was the most extraordinary thing to be part of that's probably happened to me, ever, certainly quite so publicly. But it felt good, because it felt good, apart from anything else. I'm always conscious in this job now that our students, the young people we work with, there's so much that we need to do to make sure that they know that we're walking alongside them and helping clear the barriers. And I kind of thought, well, if any of them, if any young people have seen this and are feeling just a bit better about their potential to do what they want, then we've done a good day's work here.
Absolutely.
So that was all of that.
Absolutely. And I guess it's that conflict within you, isn't it, of I think I've done right, but somebody says I've done wrong, and it does, and that very famous imposter syndrome thing of 100 people can tell me one thing and one person can knock me on something that's got so very little to do with my actual ability to do this job, and suddenly it causes you to question everything. And that just shows that true impact, doesn't it, of just how big an impact something so seemingly small can actually have on. Wow. And is it still happening? Does it keep flaring up a bit? Or
it still does. Every now and then someone will kind of like the tweet or post their picture. Or for International Women's Day, the team said to me, you should repost it, and it kind of had a little flurry again. So it's still, it's got sort of hashtag this is what a CEO looks like. It's something that's got a bit of a life, and I love that, because there's so much. There's so much to celebrate, and also there's so much change that still needs to happen. I kind of do want that to go on forever. I hope, in 20 years' time, if Twitter still exists and I'm still here and all of those things happen, I hope it's still occasionally kind of blopping up. And I hope people, the dream would be one day someone says, well, I saw that, and it made me feel braver about putting an application in, or it made me, ask someone to mentor me and give me some advice, and that happened. Because the brilliant thing about the job I do now, that it matters so much that I do well, which is why this hit me hard, because someone kind of going, you're not doing a good job, just makes you go, oh God. But the brilliant thing about the job we do now is that we get to make connections and support young people to make things happen for themselves. Mm-hmm. And the best thing about the job, which is also happens all the time, is when we get young people who say to us, because of you, I've got the job, I've got the place at university, I've got the promotion. They come back and say, can I be a mentor now, and give my advice back to the next generation of young people. They want to put, they make money and they give us money because they want to pay it all forward. And that's the kind of fabulous thing. And you see that role. We've now been a charity that's been operating for 15 years. So we've now got kind of serious alumni network who are doing things. And they'll still say, it all started when I got that work placement, or you connected me with that mentor. And that just never stops being Amazing.
Absolutely. I think those words, because of you, have got to be those three most powerful words. And sometimes it's a bad thing, but when it's but you need to know about it, don't you? But when it's a good thing, it's amazing. Because of you, it's just like, well, that's kind of why we do it. It's about that, making that difference, isn't it? Sorry, Wayne,
Absolutely.
I interrupted you then. I saw you go.
I had a thought, and then, as is often the case, the thought disappeared. No, just a couple of sort of reflections from me. I think, first of all, it's like, especially considering where you work, that was such a power move in terms of what you did, because that is actually what a CEO does, and that's what a CEO of an organisation does when presented with feedback like that. Even though if it was, however it was, meant to land with you. So there's that aspect, and as a proudly working class person as well, to know that there are people like you brave enough to make that stand publicly is really brilliant, and it will have ripple effects going forward. But also just from the way that you played it, and I know it was organic and not all of the scale of it wasn't intentional or whatever, but the knee-jerk response to that, if you were going to use Twitter as a medium, would be a sort of witch hunt for who this person is, and isn't this person awful for the feedback that they gave. But the way you played it was just really joyful, and the solidarity from around the sector. I was following this because it was a really dreary day, and I was avoiding work and all that sort of stuff as well. But like every single CEO that I respect in the sector was like, woo, this is what a CEO looks like. And it was just like, it's like the end of Lord of the Rings when the elves arrive. And it's like, the elves are here to save I think that's a really good example of when social media can be used for good. And I think there's surges of that kind of power happening within Twitter at the moment that is driving positive change. And I think this is just a great example of it. So thank you for sharing that story.
Oh, no, thank you. That's kind. And I think you're right. I think that people underestimate the power of something that's joyful and celebratory, especially when it comes to diversity. There's so much to be angry about, and there's so much that is doing harm and hurting people, and that is a burden for whether it's people of colour or people of working class backgrounds. It's their burden to carry, and that's also, we should be angry, and I get angry in my job often, but there's also so much to celebrate about. We're not just saying make change, open up to diversity, be more inclusive because of the wrongness. We're also saying really good, wonderful things will happen. You won't regret it. Organisations that make positive change about diversity and inclusion don't regret doing that. Wonderful things happen. Employers that give opportunities to the young people we work with always really value everything that they bring to the party because it's so good. They say to us, oh gosh, if it wasn't for you, we'd have been missing out on this talent. So it's really important, I think, to be kind of joyful and celebratory when the opportunity presents itself, and to see the kind of, because that's also the value of diversity is just here it all is in its beautiful, quirky difference. That's part of it. There's somebody for everyone. There's somebody for every job. There's somebody for every organisation. There's somebody for every person in all its huge range of opportunity, and that is that's wonderful and precious. So I like to celebrate the joyful, and it also hopefully makes people listen a bit more when you do get angry and say, right, now we're going to get serious and tell you, something bad is also happening here to fix.
Absolutely.
I'm still using the photograph.
Still using the photograph.
Yay!
Because I hate having my photograph taken, and so once you've got one, and this was the irony, you've got a photograph that you're quite pleased with, you use it everywhere, and then someone says to you it's all wrong, and you're like, oh God, not only do I feel dreadful, but that's a lot of work to take that photograph out of circulation. Laziness really actually was the prime motivation for all of this.
And so that kind of comes after you'll move from the charity, from the regulator to that. So how did that come about, and how did that culture shift in terms of the cultural of of the sector that you were sitting in and then moving into the charity? How did all that come about, and how did it feel, and how did you make it work?
Yeah, well, crikey, because the irony is, I think we had 13 years as a civil servant, and I think I was always not that conventional as a civil servant either. Probably much less so than I'm as a charity chief exec. I think there are lots of things. I'm a huge fan of, supporter of, champion of public service and the civil service. It's one of the kind of great things about this country that we do incredibly well. But lots of the things that give the civil service huge strength also sometimes, it constrict our ability to do things, to get things done, to make things happen. Civil service tends to be, regulators tend to be, the Charity Commission can tend to be, it can be quite closed, it can be quite secretive. There's a lot of sort of criminology about kind of what you do, why you do it, how decisions get made, how things happen. There's good reasons around some of that to sort of protect people and to insulate people, but it can lead to, let's say, criminology is always the word. Kind of people go, oh, why did they do that? They must have done that for this reason. They must be trying to do this dreadful thing. This consequence of what they've done must have been the thing that they intended. I'm terribly angry with all of that, with you there inside going, oh, that wasn't how it happened at all. And in fact, quite often, we just didn't realise that was how that was going to work out. And if we had, we probably would have made a different decision. But having made the decision now, the other thing, of course, as a kind of public servant, public decision makers, is it's incredibly hard to say we made that decision and we realise now it was probably a bad decision and we need to change our minds, because then you get a U-turn and you've climbed down, and so you kind of insist that no, the consequence either hasn't happened or was intentional or is irrelevant, and so you end up kind of often dug into these trenches of everybody believing the thing that they didn't want is happening, and everybody believing that it was all through kind of nefarious conspiracies. And actually, sometimes what you have to say is, I just didn't know, I didn't have the information. Could you explain to me how that is going to work? I see. Shall we have a conversation about what the actual best thing to do now might be? And all sorts of things about how those structures work, and certainly how the structures work between the regulator and the sector, means that's really, really, really hard for that to happen. Really, really hard. And I spent quite a lot of my time, I sometimes felt a bit like an ambassador between two planets, if not two countries, kind of both saying to colleagues inside the Charity Commission who do a difficult and complicated job and have kind of so much to do that nobody sees, and me kind of going, this is how that's actually going to work out, this is how that's going to be seen, this is how things are working for people running charities at the moment, this is what they're looking at. And also spending a lot of time talking to people in the sector and saying, actually, this is what we're trying to do, this is the thing that's motivating us, which isn't anything like what you're thinking about, it's this whole big other thing that's going on, this is what we're trying to achieve. If you can help us, if you think where we're going is wrong, if you can help us to get it right rather than just shouting at us, that will probably go down better. I could probably get some change going on. But it's incredibly hard to say, we got that wrong. And it's one of the things I absolutely hate about kind of public discourse, that surely that we should celebrate someone going, I did a thing, it's not working the way I wanted, I'm going to stop it now and do a different thing, thanks. And actually, in my experience as a communications person, when you do that, and I had to do that at the Charity Commission sometimes, I had to be the face of climb downs and U-turns, but actually when you up front kind of say, yep, that was not good, we've changed it. There's not, people worry about that because of the criticism. Actually, there's not really many places to go after that, because so you admit you got it wrong. Yep, we totally did. Yep, you're right, and we're going to change it so that we get it a bit more right next time.
Yeah.
And that's, that should be hugely positive. We should celebrate that enormously.
Yeah, it's easy to shout at an entity, isn't it? And I think what disappears quite quickly is humanity and particularly humility, and it can just be two entities shouting at each other in a two-dimensional way. And I think it's really interesting looking at what's going on in the sector at the moment in terms of regulatory bodies and discourse and change. And even though it's a very long and complicated journey ahead, it's got to be based on clarity, accountability, and humanity, isn't it? Do you know what I mean? These are groups of people who are trying to drive change. So it's how you support that and work together, isn't it?
Absolutely. And I think that's one of the things, again, I used to see it from the regulator perspective. I used to see sort of charity boards and charity leaders, who talk about the institution and trying to protect the institution and the institution's reputation at times when, again, absolutely the right thing to do would be just to say, this dreadful thing has happened. We need to find out why and make it better. That's what we're going to do now. And sometimes, again, when you're in the regulator's perspective and you see this awful thing has happened, to a charity or within a charity, whether it's a safeguarding or a financial issue or something else, and you end up having this conversation about the charity's reputation and how they need to protect their reputation. And I was always of the view that you protect your reputation best by trying to do the right thing. Not by trying to make sure people don't know that you did the wrong thing. So if you did do the wrong thing, you protect your reputation best by saying, we appear to have done the wrong thing here, that we have spotted and are trying our best to fix that. Because in the long term, then the reputation is supported. But you can go through a painful period, and that's, people don't feel able to do that. And Wayne, you're absolutely right. You lose the people in the middle of this. The thing I hate most, the thing I see sometimes and I hate, is when you get these sort of statements from institutions about things that happen that very clearly read as though a lawyer has been all over them, but also just very clearly read as though you can almost see the sort of, I want to juggle this and that and balance this, and I don't want to concede too much, nor do I want to admit fault. And actually, it's just not a person saying, I take responsibility or I want something to happen. And so the power of being that person, being sort of more personal sometimes, it was something I tried to do in my old job. And it was the thing that made me want to make the move, kind of above everything else. Is I sort of, 13 years of talking about people doing this and needing to do this better, there comes a point where you have to say, all right, I need to stop talking about this. I need to give this a go myself. If I've got ideas about how this should happen, it's time to step up. And so I made the scary jump from gamekeeper turned poacher, rabbit, whatever it is.
Yes. Throw all the metaphors in.
And my line to people who want to support the SFF is that I used to work across 170,000 charities, and I picked this one. That's how special we are. Which is only slightly a line. There's a bit of truth in that as well.
Well, I think the sector needs a lot more people like you, Sarah. So thank you for sharing that truth. It's really good to hear, and it's great for people listening to know that there are people with thoughts such as that in the sector. I think it's really thank you. So let's move on to part two. I don't know how much Claire has told you about this, but this is where we get a bit Paxman on you. So we're going to do a pincer movement, 3 questions each. They're very hardcore. We'll get under your skin one way or another. So I'll kick off with the first 3. And I suppose the context is it's been a really horrible year. And Claire and I are really good at moaning. And what we decided to do was to talk very much about, okay, let's have a good moan, but what's the good that can come out of this? What can we do going forward? So we always try and talk about what are the most positive things that we've seen in the sector. So Sarah, from your perspective, over the course of the last year, what's the positivity that you've seen?
I mean, one thing through the pandemic, which has been horrible for everybody as individuals, horrible for lots of us in terms of the impact on the groups that we support and serve, and also horrible because it's prevented us doing the things we usually do. So you have most of us in our different ways have seen the need has grown, and we felt our ability to meet that need has been truncated or been less in some way. But incredibly positive things I've seen around that. I mean, one is just the hugely collaborative way, organisationally and also individually, lots of charities have just helped each other out, shared things, jumped in. You know, when we were looking at safeguarding, as we moved our whole programme online, and suddenly went, oh, how do you arrange for a 16-year-old to do a video call with an adult from her bedroom? Because normally you just wouldn't do that, because that's a very wrong thing to do. But right now she's not going to get any employment advice if she doesn't. So we have to make that happen. We had so much help from other charities who were like, yeah, we don't know either, but this is what we think. Shall we swap ideas? We'll share. We've had some helpful advice on this. I'll send you the policy to have a look at. You know, brilliant, very practical collaboration. And I've seen charities kind of sharing their funding, their information, you know, in a way that feels new, or at least, you know, there feels like a sort of freshness around the understanding that for once, you know, whatever competitiveness exists is much less than the need for us to just come through this together and stronger. I have to shout out to a lot of the funders as well, the sort of institutional funders, who I've seen the most brilliant things that have been done in terms of flexibility on a big scale. You know, spend the money and tell us what you've done.
Yeah.
Report or don't, we don't mind much, mainly do things. And also little things, the Tudor Trust, they don't fund us, but they fund quite a lot of organisations. I know the Tudor Trust sent people some unsought money and said, spend it on the staff wellbeing, because it's been such a rubbish year. Your staff probably need some help. Lovely, generous, thoughtful things. And that has felt beautifully positive, and real demonstration of the kind of strength that we're going to need to draw on for a really long time, but with foundations that, you know, that feel like good places to build from.
Do you think those will continue, Sarah? Do you think that those will go back to, well, everybody wants to go back to how things were, and actually we're aware that's probably not going to happen, but that collaborative and that sharing and that, like you say, that where there used to be a perception maybe rather than a reality of competitiveness, do you think those will stay, or do you think they'll?
So I hope so. I mean, partly optimism is my currency. I have to hope so. You have to hope, otherwise, you know, you give up. But the reason I think it's hope rather than optimism, I think it's founded on something, is in my experience, it's much harder to start a collaboration than it is to stop. You know, the part that's hard is overcoming the lack of familiarity, the lack of trust, the lack of knowledge, getting people in a room and getting through the kind of uncomfortable part where you all kind of sit there in a prickly way, kind of going, well, I'm not going to tell you about my thing because you might do something with it, and we're gonna hold that back until we're sure. In my experience, once you've got through that, if you can get through that, and it is painful and it is hard, and everybody has to give something up, and, you know, there usually has to be at some point a bit of a row or some tears or something. But if you get through that and into a kind of bonded collaboration, it's then really hard to undo that. Yeah. Partly because people see the value of it, partly because no one wants to do that again, having gone through that, and partly because this will be really good if that's happened. It starts to become habit. Yeah. It starts to become, once you've started sharing and you've got into a rhythm of kind of, I pick up the phone and talk to that person, or we kind of swap that stuff, it starts to be built into your rhythms and your processes in such a way that you then at one point hopefully go, why did we ever not do that? That doesn't sound like that. Did that work well for us? I don't think it did it? I don't know how far along that trajectory we are. I mean, I think collaboration that's formed in the real crucible of something like this pandemic, you know, my best experience of that was work that I was privileged enough to do around the Grenfell fire, where it was, you know, incredibly tough, incredibly raw. We had small community organisations who were in pain and grief, and big organisations that were in pain and grief and exhaustion, but they just kind of had to power through it. In my experience, the kind of crucible of that forces you quite quickly through the painful parts with no real option to sort of walk off in a huff because there's nowhere else to go. And so if you've been through that, I think you are locked together in a way that we've got to hope it's easier and better to keep going. So that's my hope.
That's brilliant. I think it's kind of hard. It's hard to unlearn a better way of working, isn't it? As well. Do you know what I mean? That's the sort of. I'm the same as you. Optimism drives me, so I need to think that a residue of this will carry through. Moving on from that, it's quite pertinent today because I found it very difficult to get out of bed. But what gets you out of bed in the morning, Sarah?
Yeah, I do find it difficult to get out of bed, particularly at the moment because I'm the only person working in our house at the moment. So quite often I am, everyone else is still in their pajamas, and I'm the one who's not. But the things that really motivate me, it's absolutely in the organisation I work in, it's the young people, and I'm lucky enough that because we work with young people and because the kind of work we do in supporting them, talented young people to kind of get the breaks, we get lots of positive feedback all the time. We see a difference really quickly. Young people join the programme quite nervous, quite lacking confidence. Their talent is quite raw, and you see them within 6 months kind of smashing it in terms of the things that they're doing, and that just feels so brilliant, and so lucky to be part of it and to be there when that happens. That definitely motivates me. Also, I'm on a more selfish level, I'm a very extroverted person. I'm quite a show off. So I like talking to people, and I like asking them, why are we doing this thing that we're doing? Why are you doing that way? Or why are you doing the things that we're doing? And I like getting to help. The best thing in the world is when someone says to you, oh, that's really helped me. The penny's dropped. And I go, oh, see, I still got it. And I don't feel embarrassed about saying that, because that is what makes me tick. I want to do that. And I'm lucky enough to be in a job where I get to do a lot of that. I work with brilliant, knowledgeable people who need me to kind of, help them shape what they're doing and give them the space to do it. And then that helps them, and it helps us do what we do. And I get to feel good. What's not to like about that?
Absolutely. Perfect. I love that. Yeah, I really appreciate your honesty there as well. And now we're gonna flip that on its head. We've seen all this joy and humanity from you, but we want to get to the dark truth behind Sarah Atkinson. So I'm gonna ask you, and I expect a brilliant answer here. What is your guilty pleasure?
Really low-grade historical dramas, like proper bodice ripping level. I don't know if you ever saw a program called The Tudors.
Oh my goodness, yeah.
With Jonathan Rhys Meyers, who played Henry VIII and played him like forever, like at the point when he was full of syphilis and 16, 20 stone. Jonathan Rhys Meyers was like, no, I pretty much think I'm still going to be me. I'm still going to take that off all the time. That's my I'm proud of that, but yeah, I do love a proper historical bodice ripping teledrama.
That's your happy place. Brilliant.
Very happy. Very happy.
Excellent.
The more historically inaccurate, the better.
Brilliant. We're wearing watches and stuff.
I love it when the sorts of things that get people worked up kind of go, well, Cardinal Wolsey was dead, long before Mary, Queen of Scots, ever. No, I love it. Love it.
Those braces would not attach that way in 1872. Yeah.
He's got a watch on. Yeah.
Brilliant stuff. Over to you, Claire.
Amazing. Thank you, Sarah. Sorry, I can't get my cheeks to go down from grinning. Who are the amazing humans you would like to give a shout out to, and why?
Oh, crikey. So my team at the SMF, who have been so unbelievable this year. It was properly scary. I'd only been in, my brilliant predecessor was 10 years in the organisation. So it was a huge change for them having me come in anyway. 10 weeks in, I had to kind of do an email going, okay, guys, you heard the Prime Minister, go home and we'll work out from there how we do this entirely face-to-face delivery model that you guys have all run really well for 10 years from home on computers that our students probably haven't got, because we work with low-income students, so they probably don't have computers. They don't, as it turns out, have computers. And the team was so brilliant, because I still don't think they know how brilliant they were. they just kind of went, well, we've just enrolled 2,000 students onto this program, so we've got to do something for them. So let's just get on with that. And, you know, all sorts of things that were incredibly difficult, reshaping the program, delivering it online, making sure students had got access, working out how we're going to keep our employers and funders kind of on, but all of that. They did it in such a kind of, you know, absolutely mission driven kind of way, because the alternative was we told the students, sorry, I know we just onboarded you onto a program, but we can't help. And that just wasn't an option for them. And I love that about them. I'm so proud to be part of an organisation that thinks like that. And I'm so kind of inspired by all the things that they did and the way that they did it. So yeah, my team, absolutely. And beyond that, I mean, there are some people there's some charity leaders at the moment who I think are being so kind of thoughtful and brave about stepping forward into the some of the really difficult issues we've got around, you know, some of the huge challenges about the way that people of colour particularly, but all sorts of minoritized groups are telling us, you know, this whole thing actually hasn't worked for me for a really long time. And being so brave about stepping forward into that and saying, well, we have to do better, and I have to lead this work, and I have to admit, and there are lots of them, I don't want to pick any individuals out, but lots of them, and there needs to be more of them. There needs to be so many I can't name them, but I really value that's the kind of brave and bold leadership that I want to see. I want to follow along behind them and copy them, and be them when I grow up.
We use that phrase all the time, don't we, Wayne? When I grow up, already I'm 46, so how long is this going to take? But when I grow up, I would really like to. Okay, the very divisive question, well, the sub-question is, crumpets or muffins?
What time of day is it? Now. Because if it's now, it's crumpets, but if it's breakfast, I want English muffins.
Oh.
I mean, which is just a greedy way of saying
both.
I have both, and then can I have naan bread with my tea?
Okay.
But if I literally had to choose, I can only have one fluffy white processed carb ever again, it would be crumpets.
And what would you have on it?
I would mourn for it. Butter, more butter with butter. Okay. But I would mourn those English muffins forever.
Have a little vigil for them, maybe.
Little picture of them.
Hashtag. Okay, and what has become our favourite question? If you had to sing one song at karaoke in front of your entire organisation, what would it be and why?
Well, the honest answer is anything, because I'm a show off, as I previously said, plus I love singing. Singing is I'm not making any pretenses to be a brilliant singer, but singing is so good for your mental health. It's such good kind of recreational stuff. I've sung in lots of different sort of choirs and groups and things in my time. I'm really missing it because you can't have choirs in COVID because of breathing on people. So yeah, the truthful answer is I would just hog the microphone and sing anything. But again, picking a song, musical theatre, probably something from Cabaret, maybe this time from Cabaret.
Awesome choice.
Amazing.
Because obviously you don't just sing it, you know,
you have to do the whole. Yeah. Can't wait to see that.
And people would join in, and it would be fun and celebratory.
I'm going to get on Photoshop and try and make that happen now.
Absolutely.
It's not what a CEO looks like.
This is definitely not what a CEO looks like.
Brilliant.
No, it is.
in a sequiny hat. No.
Amazing.
Pull the hat. Brilliant. Oh, Sarah, thank you so much for coming on and being so truthful and showing your whole self. I think it's so amazing for people in the sector to see CEOs just being really human and really lovely. So thank you for that. And for those who have watched, thank you for watching. I hope you do carry on watching. Keep being kind and keep being human. Thanks very much.
Thank you.